Chronic fatigue, persistent depression, debilitating anxiety, hormone imbalance, IBS, irritability. According to the CDC, an estimated 129 million people in the US have at least one major chronic disease. It's frustrating, especially when the symptoms happen in concert and at the confusion of your doctor. My next guest is board certified in family medicine and pain management. After spending over 50 years treating patients with chronic conditions related to environmental factors, he now dedicates himself to consulting and mentorship, writing several books for both healthcare professionals and patients. Today, we are going to talk sneaky symptoms and treatment options as we ask the question, could mold be the thing making you sick? This is the Curious Introvert podcast with me, Meredith. Around here, we explore taboo questions and societal blind spots. My mission, and yours if you choose to accept it, is to inspire curiosity by exploring the nuance and paradox of our world. Please help me welcome the man working for wellness and advocating for patients, author, teacher, and medical detective, Dr. Neil Nathan. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having.
I am very excited to dive into this because it is both interesting and complicated. And part of the complication of the diagnosis process, at least with mold, is that the symptoms mimic other conditions. So I thought this would be a good place to start because it's probably the most unexpected thing that I've learned so far. What are some of the diagnoses that mold illness can get confused with?
Good place to start, I agree. Chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, autism, anxiety, depression, OCD, depersonalization, derealization, asthma, any autoimmune disease, peripheral neuropathy, and I could go on.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot. I was surprised to read in your book that mold toxins affect the area of the brain that process emotions. Can you explain that?
Sure. That area of the brain we call the limbic system. And the limbic system is the part of our brain that's trying to keep us safe. What it's doing neurologically is it's scrutinizing the stimuli that we're getting exposed to from the perspective of safety. And those stimuli can be either internal or external. And so if your limbic system doesn't think you're safe, it's going to give you symptoms not to make you miserable, but to alert you that you're getting exposed to something that it thinks isn't safe. And those symptoms are in two major categories: sensitivity and emotion. So when the limbic system is affected, anyone who has symptoms in the category of anxiety, depression, OCD, mood changes, rage, depersonalization, derealization, that's limbic by definition. And if you have any sensitivity to light, sound, chemicals, smells, food, EMFs, touch, that's limbic. So often people who have limbic issues are being told by their doctors, this is psychological, you need to take a medication for it or get therapy for it. Where in point of fact, there's a whole bunch of medical conditions that trigger the limbic system, and the limbic system is treatable per se, and we need to treat what's triggering it in the first place. And I see a lot of patients who haven't gotten the right treatment because their doctors are not aware of this.
If it causes so many problems, though, why aren't doctors more aware of it?
That's the million-dollar question. The history of medicine, in fact, the history of science, is such that new concepts, new ideas take about a generation, 20, 25 years, to be accepted by the field. Now, new technology, new medications are accepted much more readily because there's a huge economic push for that to happen. New ideas, not so much. So the whole concept of mold toxicity is relatively new. It didn't really appear on the medical scene until about 2003, when a group of physicians headed by Michael Gray wrote a couple of papers showing that patients with all kinds of complicated symptoms really had mold toxicity. And then Richie Shoemaker picked up the thread He wrote a book called Mold Warriors, in which he began to popularize the concept. Exposure to mold could cause a whole bunch of symptoms that, if you look at it in total, and you're a physician, you're not aware of it, it would be, well, nobody could have all those symptoms. It's got to be in your head. In point of fact, it's not the case.
So, if it has so much credibility, even maybe not in the mainstream with physicians, why is it so common when I talk to people about this for them to say, oh, yeah, well, we all have mold, like it's a scam or something?
I'm writing a chapter in a new book on the history of mold toxicity. And on the medical side, back in the 70s, there was an outbreak of illness in a number of schools. And health experts at that time thought it was related to mold. However, later it was found to be, for those people, Legionnaire's disease. So there appeared a number of medical papers that were published that was the hoax of mold toxicity based on that particular event. Now, since that time, there are thousands of papers in the medical literature confirming that there is something that is mold toxicity, what its symptoms are, its treatment, how we can understand it. But the medical profession has, because of that prior misunderstanding, not embraced the concept as important. So yes, I'm talking to you right now from my home in Southern Oregon, and in front of me, looking out the window, there is a huge park. And in this park, there are probably 1,000 species of mold. Every different tree and bush has a different mold species that prefers being in that area. That's its ecological niche. Now, those molds make toxins, not to make us sick, but to keep other molds out of their ecological niche. That's what they do. Now, the vast majority of those molds are not toxic. So we need to distinguish the fact thousands of species of mold out there, the vast majority aren't going to make us sick. What happens is when mold starts growing inside a building unopposed, and it's a toxic mold species, that's what makes us sick. We call that sick building syndrome. And in fact, it is common. Not everybody has it, of course, but it is estimated by the government that 47% of all houses in this country have mold present, either visible or smelling it. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's also estimated by many experts that 10 million Americans at this moment have symptoms of mold toxicity and don't know it, mostly because they're just unaware that it's there. So because it's common doesn't mean that we blow it off. I mean, you can remediate a home and make it safe. You can get rid of mold. And if you have it in your body, you can treat it. But blowing it off and say it doesn't exist is doing millions of Americans a grave disservice, because it's a very real condition that really makes people very sick sometimes. And it could be treated.
When you say very sick, I mean, you've seen the worst of the worst. Can you give some examples? Because I think, I always have to do these interviews with like the most skeptical listener in mind, right? And so I'm picturing that listener going, what's very sick? Like you got a runny nose, all the time. Can you kind of share some background of some of the patients that you've helped work with?
Absolutely. So first of all, what mold toxin does to the body is it creates a global inflammatory process. And that means that inflammation can affect any part of the body that is either weak for that person, or if it's really a lot of toxin, the whole body. That means the symptoms of mold toxicity can include, top to bottom, difficulty with vision, brain not working well, cognitive impairment. And by the way, Dale Bredesen, who is an expert on Alzheimer's disease, has found in his research that 90% of the patients that we're seeing with Alzheimer's have some degree of mold toxicity. We're talking major league epidemic here. that is currently not recognized. So again, in addition to the psychological things which we all already mentioned, all gastrointestinal symptoms can be affected. So we're talking bloating, distension, gas, reflux, constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain. That can be mold toxicity. Respiratory symptoms, shortness of breath, air hunger, palpitations of the heart, peripheral neuropathy, other neurological conditions can be mold toxicity. Fatigue, huge symptoms, super common in mold toxicity. So if someone is unaware of this and someone starts complaining of a bunch of these, again, the response of both medical people and their family is, nobody can have all those symptoms. This has got to be in your head. But again, that's not the case at all. You can get all of those symptoms from it. And again, depending on your genetics or your own personal biochemistry, you can get some of them and all of them.
Are there any symptoms that are very specific to mold illness? Like only people with mold illness have XYZ symptoms?
Yeah, there's a few of them. One of them is a feeling that there is a vibration inside your body, not visible, but an internal perception of vibration that is quite unique to mold toxicity. Certain types of pain, electrical pains, ice pick-like pains are unique in that particular arena.
What's the difference between mold illness and mold allergy?
Well, allergy is allergy. So allergic symptoms would be runny nose, itchy eyes, itchy throat, maybe asthma. And as you can see, that is only a teeny piece of what I'm talking about in terms of mold toxicity. People with mold toxicity can have profound fatigue. They have a kind of fatigue that has a fancy name called post-exertional malaise, which means when they try to do something or exercise, they get unusually wasted afterwards, anywhere from hours to days. That's a component of that. Again, people will be cognitively impaired. People who are brilliant people running corporations all of a sudden can't think their way out of a paper bag. That they will be anxious and can't understand that. Like, my life is good. Why am I anxious? It's a physical anxiety, not an anxiety because the IRS is going to audit me tomorrow. It's an anxiety that is kind of internal.
Like inside out?
Yeah, very much so. So I mean, these are not minor symptoms. Many of the people that I work with, and I work with people who are particularly from mold toxicity, are even bedbound. They literally don't have the strength to get out of bed or be able to function. And these are not people who are hypochondriacs. These are people who are frustrated by this because many of the people I work with are heads of corporations or they run businesses of many employees, and all of a sudden they can't do what they did before.
So how are people like that acquiring this illness all of a sudden?
You get exposed to mold, and the primary source of mold is water-damaged buildings.
Which is great
They
news for here
are
in Florida. All of the hurricanes and it's bad.
Florida is the second moldiest state in the country, according to experts, Texas being the first. I don't think that one should argue about which is present, because both of you are being affected by the hurricanes that come out of the Gulf. Houses aren't really built to sustain 80 to 100 mile an hour winds with rain coming in from directions you're not supposed to come in. So they get into buildings. Once they get into the walls, then mold starts to grow. Sheetrock, which is the commonest building material inside of walls in this country, barring none, the inside layer of sheetrock is paper, which is made from tree bark. And tree bark is got mold on it. So it's kind of like instant mashed potatoes. You add water to the basic tree bark and mold starts to grow. And once it starts to grow, then it has a life of its own. And it can come in cracks inside the wall, teeny cracks in a building structure as a superhighway to a mold. It can enter the house and then begin to settle into places. And then we take it into our body by breathing it. And the toxins that they make are what's making us sick. So mold itself, going back to your previous question, causes allergy. Mold toxin doesn't particularly cause allergy. It causes this global inflammatory reaction that is what's making our patients sick.
How long does it normally take to be exposed to mold before it becomes a problem?
Super varies. If you have a robust immune system, you might live in a moldy environment for years and be minimally sick or not even sick at all. But if your immune system takes a hit, now that hit could be COVID, which it was for many people, any severe infection, surgical procedure, menopause, childbirth, or any major emotional, the loss of a loved one, anything that weakens the immune system, it loses containment. And the toxin that's already in your system now has a party. And once that starts, then we're off to the races, and we really need to help those people get the mold out of there so that their immune system can bounce back.
I've heard you say that mold has a hive consciousness, which reminds me of the show The Last of Us. Have you seen this show? Okay. I mean, I don't mean to give you homework, but I'm giving you homework. This show is about mold that causes a zombie apocalypse. And and it feels threatened. It feels threatened when like other stuff comes near it, which I think I even read that other molds and bacterias can become like territorial, like aggressive. Can you unpack that? Because for most of us, we have like, the natural world is over here and our regular world, like our computers and our houses and our cars are over here, and never shall the two meet. We kind of have this internal feeling of being separate from nature. So the whole idea that there's even a smidgen of truth to zombie mold, coming after us, having a hive mentality is completely science fiction.
It is science fiction. So I know I like science fiction, but now let me unpack that a little bit. So when we have mold toxicity in us, the vast majority of our patients also have Candida. And Candida really does have a hive consciousness. If you have Candida in you, for example, it craves carbs. It craves sugar, fruits, and sweets. So a lot of people who have Candida have this unaccountable craving for sweet things that they normally wouldn't have. And they don't even understand it. So it's like, this is not me. They're right. It's not them. I don't think of me as Neil and the 70 trillion bacteria that live inside me. I'm Neil. And in my thinking about Neilness, I don't think that there is Candida in my body that has hive consciousness saying, I want carbs. But there is a biochemical message sent from the Candida to us, which is, I want carbs. We don't distinguish it. It's not like, oh yeah, it's the Candida in me that wants the carbs and I don't really want the carbs. Most human beings don't make that distinction. So I think that's the kind of hive consciousness you're talking about.
It is interesting to kind of examine these unexamined parts of our well-being, because we live with the symptoms, but somehow the causes don't always make themselves obvious. And so moving on to mold and the individual, how would somebody who thinks they might have mold illness begin to test for it? What would you recommend?
Let me answer that, but I want to go back to the EMF for just a moment.
Okay.
I have 2 chapters in my book, The Sensitive Patient's Healing Guide, on EMFs, written by top people in the field. One of them is written by a biochemist named Marty Paul from Washington State University, who actually has worked out the biochemistry of how EMFs are affecting some people and making them sick. So it's not a psychological issue. And I just wanted to emphasize one more point. Mold toxin predisposes to people being affected by EMFs because of the way it affects the limbic system. The limbic system controls mold sensitivity, including sensitivity to EMFs. So if mold is doing that, then that means our patients will have a higher percentage of EMFs, so we have to consider that. Okay, now I'll come back to your question. It's not hard to make the diagnosis of mold toxicity by measurement. There are 4 labs in this country that have different assays for mold toxicity. 3 of them measure it in the urine, 1 of them measures it in the blood. So the easiest thing to do from my perspective is to get a urine specimen and look for mold toxin in your urine. If there's a lot of mold toxin coming out of your urine, this is not rocket science. This is a no-brainer. It's in your body. It's coming out of your body, and we can measure it in your urine. So the labs that we like are the Real-Time Lab, Vibrant Health, Mosaic, and MyMyco are all labs that will run those tests. For people who are on Medicare, the real-time test is free. And in my experience, real-time gives us the most accurate tests that we can follow most accurately over time. But any of those labs, if you're seeing mold toxin a higher than normal amount in the urine, you have it.
How long does it normally take to clear it out of a person's system?
Usually takes a year or more. So it's not a quick fix. Keep in mind that mold, which goes along with Candida, love it inside of us. Once it gets in us, it usually colonizes. Colonizing means it's now growing in the gut and the sinuses, the parts of our body that are in direct connection to the outside world. And once it's growing, it's happy there, making toxin, living its life. Temperature is perfect, lots of nutrients, it's damp, dark, moist. Why would it leave? So it takes a great deal of effort on our part to get the mold out. And in my experience, there's 3 main components to treating it. The first is to be sure that you're not getting exposed to it, either at home, work, or a car, or we need to find out where it's coming from. Now, it could be old. It could be you've moved now into a new place, which is perfectly fine, but you're carrying the mold with you from a previous location, meaning it's now in you, making the toxin. So if your current place is fine, great. But if you are still living in a moldy environment, you cannot get well until you either get out of that environment or get it remediated. That's a deal breaker. That's step 1. Step 2 is to take binders that are specific for the toxins that we find on our test. So if we get our urine test, it will show us, okay, you have these specific mycotoxins in your body. And we have tables that show us how to do that. So for example, in the second edition of my new book, Toxic, there's a big table showing which binders bind which toxins. Look in your report, see what toxins you have. Okay, I need to take charcoal or clay or chlorella or Saccharomyces or perhaps a prescription for something like cholestyramine or alcohol. But we can tailor make it to exactly what's in our body. And then the third part, once the binders are in us, mopping it up, then we can take antifungals, either as a nasal spray for our sinuses or oral for our gut, to get it out of the body. It does take a while, but it doesn't mean you have to wait a year to get well. You can start getting much quicker than.
In your book, you say it's important to start with bioflavonoids before binders. Can you explain that?
Concurrent, I wouldn't say before. And that's actually one of the pearls from Jill Krista, who wrote that section of my chapter on mold. Jill is one of our country's foremost naturopathic physicians, and I have the privilege of teaching with her for the last 5 years. And Joe points out that the two organs of our body that help clear mold from us are our liver and our kidneys. And the bioflavonoids help the kidneys to function better, ultimately, to do their part in getting rid of the mold.
And bioflavonoids, you can eat those in food, right? But there's also like a supplement I think I saw, which
Yeah,
is there like a better one better than the other?
there's a bunch. Resveratrol might be the most commonly used one. You can buy resveratrol in any health food store and take it.
Are there foods that work against this process? I thought I remember reading like you probably shouldn't eat kombucha if you were trying to remove mold illness from your body.
That's controversial. There are people who feel that if you're taking any fermented foods, that there is mold or candida in that fermented product. And then there are other experts who say, well, there are yeasts in those particular products, but those yeasts are not toxic yeasts. They're just okay. I personally have not felt that you have to avoid eating fermented foods when you're working on mold. Other people have a different take on it. But the diet, when we are treating patients with mold toxicity, is high protein, low carb. The basic concept here is if there is candida and mold inside of us, why would we feed it? And the favorite food for candida and mold is sugar, fruit, most favorite, carbs, second favorite. So high protein, low carb is the right way to basically starve the candida and mold in you so that we're moving along on the healing path.
How low carb are we talking? Like how many grams a day?
Varies from one person to another. I usually suggest starting at 60 grams of carbs a day. Some people just don't feel right at 60 grams. They just feel awful. And so sometimes you need to go to 80 or 100 grams in order for them to feel comfortable. So it varies. But for each person, you want to make it as low as they can handle comfortably.
How do you eat low carb and also get the fiber that you would need in order to pass the toxins like you should?
Big fiber.
Well, the fiber has carbs. Like my, Thorn brand fiber powder, I don't know, 15 carbs. So are you talking about net carbs?
Yes, I'm talking net carbs.
Ah,
I,
okay, okay.
I don't include fiber as a carb.
As a carb. Okay. Okay. So those carbs you would get from eating vegetables, in a sense, they wouldn't count.
Correct. They don't count. You can have bran or psyllium fiber or any of the fibers are fine. And actually, fiber helps to pull toxins out of the body. So it's a very good thing to take.
When it comes to the function of the liver and the kidney, as hard workers in this process, is it bad if people are also drinking alcohol? I feel like this is such a silly question, but I'm trying to be the most pragmatic as I can for those folks out there that are really wanting to make a difference.
So you already know the answer to that question.
You are, yeah.
But also, I do not believe that human beings are capable of perfection.
Yeah.
So an occasional glass of alcohol, that's fine. That's not going to mess with your ability to heal. But drinking it on a regular basis, 2 or 3 glasses of wine or beer a day, not a good idea.
You talk a lot in your book about the importance of magnesium in the role of successful detoxification, especially as the patient is coming to like the end of their treatment plan. Why is that so important?
Two answers to that question. When our patients are taking the binders that we need to give them to get the toxins out of their body, those predispose to constipation. And we do not want our patients getting constipated. Being constipated means that you're not moving your bowels, and that means that you're holding the binder bound to toxin in the body. Some of that bound toxin is going to escape, get reabsorbed by the gut, and get back into the system. So we do not want our patients getting constipated. Magnesium is a natural ability to improve peristalsis, intestinal motility. So for many of our patients, really need to be taking magnesium along the way. Second, for reasons that I don't think anybody knows, anyone with a chronic illness has a tendency to lose magnesium from their body and not have enough. And magnesium is essential for hundreds of biochemical reactions in the body that require it. So there's a couple of reasons why we really need it.
I'm going through my old mold journey, and I think I've had low magnesium my whole life, but I take like 900 milligrams a day, and still my my numbers are like they're really low. And 900 milligrams of mag glycinate is a lot. Is that something that contributes to mold illness symptoms, or is that more causal? Is it chicken or is it egg?
Both.
Ah, of course.
Sorry. It's both. Not having enough magnesium profoundly affects the body's ability to make energy. Our mitochondria require magnesium for many of the hundreds of reactions by which ATP is generated in our body. So the symptoms of a low magnesium include fatigue and tiredness and some of the things we've already been talking about. Muscles require magnesium for optimum functioning, so cramps, tremors, fasciculations, common when we have magnesium deficiency, and that's another way of our body needing it. So yes, we can have symptoms of magnesium deficiency added to the typical symptoms of mold toxicity. And having a chronic condition, I think what happens is, now I don't think it's ever been proven conclusively, is that the kidneys get leaky to magnesium and it can't stay in the system.
Well, hey, you seem like you're enjoying this episode so far. Have you hit the follow button on your podcast player yet? It's a free way you can support the show and ensure that you never miss an episode. It wouldn't hurt my feelings at all if you just hit pause and gave that follow button a little tippity tap. You're the best. Okay, back to the show.
So magnesium, an important component, yes.
So for a person who is like me, who just I could eat the whole freaking jar of magnesium and nothing, is intravenous magnesium the next step, or does
Yep.
that okay.
Yep, that's where I was going to go with this, which is, again, I've been working with magnesium for a very long time. And there used to be a test which is no longer available, which was an intracellular magnesium level. It's the most accurate way to know what your magnesium is, because magnesium is essentially an intracellular mineral. That most of the magnesium in our body is not floating around in our blood, so we measure that. That doesn't completely tell us what are our cells doing from a magnesium perspective. There is a test currently available as a red blood cell magnesium level, which is more accurate, but most accurate was looking at the magnesium inside of cells. So there used to be a test available, which my patients called pap smear of the tongue, where you take a tongue blade and scrape the tongue, smear some cells onto the slide, fix it, and then they would do a mass spec test of that, measuring it. And what we found clinically, just empirically, was if the magnesium was a little bit low, taking supplements worked really well. Taking magnesium glycinate, as you are, or magnesium taurate, one of my favorites, magnesium citrate, all absorbable forms of magnesium. If you take magnesium oxide, much, much less is absorbed. That doesn't help you as much as some of the other forms of magnesium. But if the magnesium deficiency was at a particular level low, unless we built up the magnesium by giving it intravenously, we could never catch up. So to answer your question, we often needed to give some magnesium IVs, often in the form of a Myers cocktail, to build up the cellular level to a certain point, and at that point, orally could take over and then work functioning.
Something else that I was also surprised by in your book was the idea of a reboot. And I think you even used a computer analogy there where you said, like, you use virus cleaning software to clean up your computer, but it's not going to be able to do its thing unless you shut off the computer and turn it back on again. And that the body has a similar response to this. So at the end of somebody's mold detox journey, that they would in fact need to kind of reboot their limbic system. Can you share some insight into that? Because that was so interesting to me.
Okay. So there's a different reboot at the beginning of the journey and a different one at the end of the journey. I'll talk about the end of the journey first. So mold toxin messes with the pituitary's ability to regulate hormones. So, for example, the main ones being adrenal, thyroid, sex hormones. If those are low in our patients, giving them those while they're healing helps their body to function much better, and they will get much better and feel better as they go through the journey. For most people, when the mold is out of the system, those reboot themselves, but not everybody. So that for some people, when the mold is out, we literally have to give them hormones to get their systems back running again. That's the end of the journey. In the beginning of the journey, mold toxicity messes with the limbic system, what we call the vagal nerve system, and mast cell activation, causing. And for many of our most sensitive or sickest patients, we have to treat them first, or they'll never be able to tolerate the binders and the treatment that we need to give them to get them well. So on the front end, we want to reboot the limbic vagal systems as one of the first things we do. How do I know if they need doing? Kind of laid it out for you. If talking with my patient at the first visit, some of my questions are, do you have any sensitivities to light, sound, EMFs, food, smell? If the answer is yes, okay, they're telling me their limbic system needs help. If they have anxiety, depression, their limbic system needs help. On the vagal side, if they're telling me that they have GI symptoms of every type, shortness of breath, heart palpitation, POTS, temperature dysregulation, that means their autonomic nervous system needs help. And the limbic and vagal systems are so intertwined that almost always we have to reboot them together. Then we want to add to that mast cell activation, which occurs in most of those. So those are things we often have to address in the beginning and not at the end.
And how is that addressed when you reboot the limbic and vagal nerve system?
Okay, so I'll talk about all three systems because they're all intertwined. So on the limbic system, there's a number of very well worked out methods to reboot that system by teaching the limbic system to be less hypervigilant. I think that's the best way to describe it. So there's Annie Hopper's dynamic neural retraining system. There's Ashok Gupta's amygdala retraining system. There's Kathleen King's primal trust as the three main systems that we use to reboot the limbic system. Basically, people go into their computer online, and it's an instructional course in which you literally learn to reboot that limbic system. Honestly, I think every man, woman, and child in this country needs to learn how to reboot their limbic system. COVID did a number on our entire world. So if you don't have enough stress of just dealing with life's vicissitudes, here's another one. So I think we're also exhausted dealing with the world as we know it, that a lot of people just tune out and turn on the television or play video games or whatever to unwind. There should be some limbic retraining there so that we literally can refresh our nervous systems and not have them on edge as they would be if the limbic system is hurt. Now, on the vagal side, there's all kinds of things you can do on the light side to reboot it. Humming, singing, gargling, gargling. It works a little bit. There are eye exercises that are available to do that. There are new devices on the market called vagal nerve stimulators. There's osteopathic cranial work. every form of meditation, breathing is another way of rebooting the system. Frequency-specific microcurrents, one of my favorite methods. So there's a whole bunch of ways of rebooting the vagal system. And then we get the large topic of mast cell activation, which we've recognized is way more common than we ever think it used to be. And for that, there's all kinds of medications and supplements that you can take to quiet that down, to allow progress to be made. And we can talk about it if you want, but that's a whole nother subject.
Yeah, you cover it really nicely in your book, though. It's interesting that you painted the picture of the person coming home from work and then they play video games. And in their mind, I'm sure they're thinking, yeah, I'm unwinding. I'm doing something that I love. But if I'm understanding you correctly, you're referring to something that's much more primal, like something like deep within at a base layer, at a foundational layer that needs to turn off and turn back on.
On the deepest level, I think one of the things that is hurting our whole civilization is the fact that we're no longer in contact with the natural world. You alluded to that before, which is, like it or not, we're animals. And we're on this planet, which we are unfortunately polluting badly in every way conceivable. And to really unwind, I'm going to call it pseudo unwinding. If you're playing a video game, you're distracting yourself, but you're not necessarily quieting your nervous system. I mean, if you think of a shoot 'em up video game where you're at here and you're, that's not unwinding. Distracting, yes. It's not unwinding. Unwinding is taking a walk in the park, taking a deep breath, looking at a sunset. If you live near the ocean like I do, then watching the waves walking on the beach. But that is where human beings really recharge and really refresh. The new advent of AI is adding to the fact we don't even take the effort to do things we used to do. I mean, it's estimated that we use 5% of our brain as it is. Well, now with AI, you can 1% of your brain. You don't have to think about anything anymore. To me, these are potentially major impediments to our civilization as we know it, because we're no longer in touch with the natural world, which is where we ought to be. Forgive me for going off on that tangent, but I think that that's critical to go.
Everyone comes to a point with whatever they're dealing with that the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of doing something different. So I think that's the thing. As we wrap up, I want to ask you about habits that maybe we need to start or stop. And one of them has to do with cleaning our houses, because I'll confess that before reading your book, I had never equated a dusty surface with mold. And I had heard that bleach was not a good idea, but I didn't know why. So I would love for those two things to be a focus specifically, if you don't mind.
Sure. Bleach is kind of the out of sight, out of mind concept where, okay, I see this black stuff growing on my windowsill, so here comes the bleach and I'll wipe it off. And oh goodness, it's gone now. Actually, because it's microscopic, it's not completely gone. And what you've done is you've killed off the weakest mold, and the strongest survives, so that what's growing next is going to be even more toxic. You can't get rid of mold by putting bleach on something and getting rid of it. You have to figure out where it's coming from. It's growing on water, it has to. So where is the water coming from? Is there a leak in that window? Is there something seeping in from underside? Bleach is not the answer. Looks like it, for a little while. It might appease your sense of, okay, the black stuff is out of there for a little while. And in terms of dust, I don't think that's the main problem. It's not the dust, it's the airflow through the house, which is when, in the old days, when we built houses, and mold was not as big a problem back then, it's because air was flowing through the house. So air containing mold flows in, flows out. Now we have, if mold is in the house, it's got nowhere to, it's stuck in there, and it's the airflow issue. So that, yes, the mold is in the dust. If there's airflow, well, you could have dust in your home and you're not really putting yourself at risk. It's that you don't want water leaks in your house triggering it in the first place. Mold can survive in a dry area for centuries. They've taken mold spores from the Egyptian pyramids and put water on it, and you can still grow mold out of it. So mold can literally go dormant for endless periods of time. It's when it is exposed to water that it gets going. So the key is, I think I want to change your focus to not so much dusting, but being really alert to any water leaks in the house and cleaning them up as quickly as possible, because that's where the issue is going to come from.
Are there any other, I'll call them like detox hygiene habits that you recommend? And I ask this because in the, wellness community, they like to do these things and I think it's interesting, but you do kind of wonder, okay, which of these are worth the time and the money? Which of these are not as legit? For example, the ionic foot baths or something like that is
Mhm.
one. Detox teas is another. Infrared saunas, dry saunas, taking a cold shower, cold plunging. I don't know if that's really a detox, but those sorts of things. Are there any of those that you feel like, yeah, once a quarter, that's a good idea. Everyone should do that.
All of the things you mentioned have value. You can get so caught up in the details, you can miss basics. If we're talking about health, my first priority is spiritual health, which means maximizing what you're doing that is giving your life meaning and purpose. In whatever form that take, it may take a religious bent, it may be fly fishing, it may be a creative endeavor, whatever is meaningful to you as an individual and nourishing it. Again, not spacing out on video games. That doesn't qualify as meaningful. Sorry about that.
I'm not a
But
gamer, but I think it's a valid example. Yeah.
and is only meant as an example. But that is the number one energetic of the spiritual energy which infuses us, has the greatest healing power. And that's something that I think always needs to be thought about, and it doesn't get a lot of airtime. That's number one. Eating organic, looking at the water you drink, being sure it's pure, taking the time to do something to truly relax your body. Yoga, Tai Chi, meditation, the walk in the park. Don't have to make a rigid discipline out of it. Especially, you don't want to beat yourself up about it if you're not doing it. Oh, I didn't do my Tai Chi this week. I'm such a bad person. That's bad for your limbic system. It's not. That's not helpful. It's about living a life in balance, not overdoing anything. So our sauna is helpful, yes. Our 100-foot bath helpful, yes. Both especially helpful because of the toxicity of the world that we live in. It's really helpful. Eating a lot of fiber, very helpful. Those are things that pull toxins out of our body, and that's something we need to take the burden off of our liver, which is working overtime to help us with the various exposures that we have going. I think those, to me, are critical. Again, staying in balance, spending time with the members of our family, and not retreating into our own world or drinking alcohol to numb ourselves. We still need to be reaching out into the family to make the connections we need. To me, those are essential.
Well, it's stuff that we overlook because we are habituated to more Amazon Prime type stuff. Like, oh, how can I buy myself into wellness? So the boring, if you will, prescriptions of time with family and taking care of your spirit, they aren't as sexy, but they matter.
They matter more than whether you've taken N-acetylcysteine today or alpha lipoic acid or something like that. Are those helpful? Sure they are. But I like your languaging for not wanting a supplement to convince you that I'm taking care of all those needs because I'm putting this one thing in my body today. You really need to take care of your body spiritually, energetically, emotionally, and physically. We didn't even talk about exercise. And those are central to what we as a being need to be doing on a regular basis. In truth, having practiced medicine for over 50 years, a lot of my patients just are overwhelmed with their lives and don't know how to restructure them to live healthier life with more meaning. And they just kind of are going through the motions. That's not where you want to be.
Yeah, there is a through line of intention with everything, I think. Thank you so much for this conversation and all of the work that you do. I already have another one of your books on my, speaking of Amazon Prime, on my Amazon Prime list because you have so many that are just so incredible. And I really loved this one, Toxic: Heal Your Body from Mold Toxicity, Lyme Disease, and Multiple Chemical Sensitivities. So good. Tell people where they can get your books and stay in touch with the new books that you're coming out with.
Well, Amazon has them all, so that's an easy one. And I have a couple more that are coming down the pike right now. My website is simply neilnathanmd.com. That's very simple. I don't brand myself or promote myself because I'm not interested in that. But I am hoping that the information that I've learned is going to be helpful to you. So it's only from that perspective that I encourage you to maybe look at some of my other books because there's a lot about health there that could be valuable.
I agree 100%. And thank you again. This was fantastic.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for listening. Since you've made it this far, you're officially invited to my private Facebook group. In there, you can easily give me direct feedback on episodes, weigh in on future topics, and participate in giveaways. Search MFR Curious Insiders on Facebook or click the link in the show notes. If you liked this episode, you'll also like the one with the man who went from being a felon to being $1 million business owner. That is episode 234. And stay tuned next week for a remastered favorite with a PhD sex researcher and vibrator museum curator. Yeah, that's a real thing. On the history of vibrators. Until then, keep it curious.